morning. Good morning. I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving and you're full of turkey or whatever else that you had. Welcome to those who are worshiping online. We're glad to have everybody here with us today. Just as you heard, if you haven't scanned the QR code yet, please do that because you'll find the top 3 things happening. And a big one that's happening starting tomorrow is Giving Tuesday. I know it's Monday, but Giving Tuesday will start tomorrow on Monday and go through the end of the day on Tuesday. For about 30 hours, we're going to open all of our giving portals, and we're going to ask you to help be a movement of hope by giving to our community partners. And so if you've been following us on our Facebook page, we've been highlighting some of those ministries and partnerships in the community that do a lot of incredible work beyond what we can do as one church. But when we partner with them, a lot of people get ministered to and a lot of needs get met. So you can see who all our partners are there, but if you'll scan the code, you can see it. You can see what Giving Tuesday is. And for about 30 hours, we're going to do our best to be generous, and everything that you give is going to go to our community and go to meet people in need this Christmas season. So join us, follow us on our social media platforms, and you can connect with us there. Well, today we're starting a new series called Be Not Afraid. And I don't know if you feel this way, but it feels like there's more things to be afraid of than there used to be. Do you feel that? It feels like people's hearts and minds are heavier than they used to be. And I remember when I was a kid, there weren't many things to be afraid of. There were some, but there weren't many. And we kind of had these intuitive ways of dealing with, childhood fear. It's like when you go to bed at night, you shut the closet door because you don't know what's going to crawl out of there when you're asleep. So you just go ahead and shut that. The worst thing to do is get in bed and be laying at the door open all night. Nobody wants that. So you know how to deal with that. Or we all knew that if you left any body part out from under the cover, that something could come out from under the bed and get it when you're asleep. So if you felt cold air anywhere, you knew you got to tuck that in. Because, an arm laying out, something could just grab it and pull you out of bed in the middle of the night. We knew how to handle that. Or the worst one was if you had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. I don't know what you did, but what I used to do is I used to back up on the bed as far as I could and get a running start and jump as far, because I didn't know what would be, swiping from under the bed, trying to get my legs when they hit the ground. So I would jump as far as humanly possible, to try to get to the doorway to land, go into the bathroom, come back. And then I don't know if you had that, we work on this. This is a childhood skill. You try to simultaneously hit the light switch and lunge back toward the bed at the same time. You know what I'm saying? You're just like swapping like this, hoping you're not going to fall. And when you land in the bed, of course, you have to tuck the cover all the way in up your neck because everything under the cover is safe and everybody knows that. And, the world was a simple place, right? But we grow up and we learn that we're surrounded by things to be afraid of. And so let me just give you some of those this morning. There's a big concern about the affordability of a home. Are young people going to be able to afford a home? Are old people going to be able to afford a home? Are we going to be able to afford to retire or pay medical bills? And then there's mass shootings and runaway national debt, invasive spider species that are sweeping America. The planet's overheating. There's a shortage of doctors and medical personnel. We have supply chain issues. Venezuelan gangs are taking over apartment complexes, and there's terrorism and cyber terrorism and forever chemicals in our water, and microplastics, we're told, are now in everything in the air. The average person, I heard the other day, eats the equivalent of a credit card worth of plastic every day. That can't be good. Shortage of honeybees. War in the Middle East, war in Ukraine. Who knows what war's going to boil out of that? And then there's artificial intelligence that's taking over the world. It's the rise of the machines. Robots are going to rise and be smarter than us. And, we'll be robot slaves before it's over. You might have heard this story several years ago. There was a lady in Arkansas who was sitting in her car in a parking lot, and she heard this bang followed by a sharp pain in the back of her neck. And she grabbed the back of her head, and somebody walked by, and she's panicking, and they said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "I've been shot in the head, and my brains are falling out, and I'm holding my brains in." And that's not what happened. What happened is a can of biscuits overheated in the back seat of the car, and they fired dough up on the back of her head, and she held it, and she thought her brains were falling out. Look, there's no shortage of things to be afraid of, and there's no shortage of outlets that will update you on all the things there are to be afraid of. But today I want to read what the Bible says about fear. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind." That's a good word, isn't it? God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. What I want to do in this series is we're going to look at 3 different parts of the Christmas story, one today and one the next 2 weeks, and we're going to look at 3 times when an angel came and declared, "Do not be afraid." So if your heart's heavy this morning or you're carrying some extra burden, this message is for you. What I want to do this morning is give you 4 thoughts from the account of Mary, the mother of Jesus, encountering an angel as part of the Christmas story. Now, we all know that Mary was the mother of Jesus, right? That's not headline news. But I don't know if you ever thought about this or not. Mary never planned to be the mother of Jesus. She was the mother of Jesus, but she never planned it. She was a teenage girl. She was dating a guy. His name was Joseph. And I imagine that she had plans of her own, like a lot of young ladies would in her position. And Joseph was a carpenter, and he was cute, and his teeth were white, or whatever, probably not back then. And he was going to open up a little carpenter shop in downtown, and the business was going to grow, and they were going to build the business from the ground up, and God was really going to bless it, and they were going to have a wedding, and it was going to be so good, and it was going to be in this cool rustic barn event venue with modern vibes and a lot of green plants, and it was just going to be amazing. And they had already paid for their honeymoon on the beach, and they were going to live in an apartment, a little 1-bedroom apartment downtown. She'd already picked up her colors, and in a couple of years they were going to have babies, and they were going to put them in preschool because we don't want them to get behind. So they're going to have a little Mary and a little Joseph of their own. But here's the thing, but God interrupted that plan. Now, why does God do that? Why would God interrupt your plan? Well, for starters, we think we know best, but the Bible tells us that His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. And He sees the whole picture, and He knows us better than we know ourselves. So here's the first thought this morning. Sometimes God's purpose is different than our plans. And we see that in the Christmas story. Luke Chapter 1, verse 26, in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary. The angel went to her and said, "Greetings, you who are highly favored, the Lord is with you." But look at verse 29. Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this must be. Okay, so you have this event, this young girl who has all these plans, and she's, walking through life, everything's going good. An angel appears to her. That's awesome. I mean, can you imagine an angel? An angel's never appeared to me. Most people that I know have never had an angel appear to them. An angel appeared to her and says to her, "You're highly favored, and God is with you." Now, how does Mary interpret that? Troubled. Why was she troubled? Because she had other plans. She's saying, wait a minute, why me? Why did you appear to me? Why are you picking me? Why are you favoring me? What exactly are you asking me to do? And by the way, don't mess with my plans. I've been working on this most of my life. From the time I was a little girl, I've been dreaming about my wedding and my marriage and the apartment and the carpenter shop and the 2 kids, and I've been planning this most of my life. I'm so glad that Jesus, the mother of Jesus, felt this way, because it's human to feel that way. Here's the second thought. Sometimes interruptions are God's invitations. Sometimes what God says is, I'm taking you away from your plans, but I'm leading you to my purpose. I'm taking you away from my plan, but I'm leading you to my purpose. And what Mary's thinking is, I had a plan. I've been working on it for a long time. I've been heading this direction. I don't understand. But God may interrupt your plans. Maybe you thought you were going to go to, that certain school, and you didn't end up going to that school. Maybe you thought you would have that dream job, and you didn't get that dream job. Maybe you thought you were going to marry that certain person. You didn't marry that person. Maybe you thought you had a plan to have this certain lifestyle, and it didn't turn out that way. You had a plan, but God had a purpose. I remember when I was in high school, for a minute, I thought I wanted to be a forest ranger, because I just like being outside. So I thought, perfect, you just ride around in your truck and be outside all the time. That'd be awesome. I want to be a forest ranger. And I think really what I wanted, I was raised in quite a bit of chaos. I think I just wanted a peaceful environment. But all those plans came to an end when I talked to one of my teachers about it in school. My teacher's like, oh, that's great. You're going to have to take a lot of science in college, right? I was like, no, I'm out. I'm not going to be a forest ranger. I'm not taking a bunch of science. I can tell you that right now. That part of academia was not in my brain. And then I felt like I was called to ministry, so I thought, great, I know what God's plan is for my life. I want to follow that. I'll do the traditional thing. I'll graduate high school. I'll go to school. The thing is, I couldn't afford it. So I had to stay home for a year, and I had to work 3 jobs to make enough money to start my first year of college. But here's the thing. I had a plan, but God had a purpose. Do you know that year was one of the best years of my life? And it started out with some of the greatest disappointment in my life. But it ended up being one of the best years of my life. I was blessed that year. I grew that year. I learned so much that year. So many good things happened in my life. And then I felt God wanted me to be a missionary. So I went to college and I got a degree in missions. That's what my undergraduate degree is. It is in missions. So I thought I was going to be a missionary. My wife and I were this close to moving to Belgium to work with the international church there. And God had a different purpose. And then I thought I was going to be a youth pastor, so I became a youth pastor, and I thought I was going to stay a youth pastor for a long, long time. And then I can take you to the place where I remember where God said, here's a crossroads. You've been following this plan, and it's a good plan, and it was my plan, but now my plan's changed. And my purpose for you is over here. And man, it was a shift. It was an interruption to what I thought I was going to be doing. So I thought, well, okay, I'm not going to be a youth pastor anymore. What am I going to do? I guess I can't sing, so I'm not doing anything in the arts, So maybe I guess the next thing is to be a pastor. But here's the thing: I had served with my pastor for 6 years, and he followed a pastor that had been in his church for 29 years. And I saw how hard that was to follow someone that had been long tenured, and I saw behind the scenes just how difficult it was. And I thought, I don't want to do that. I don't ever want to do that. Yeah, some of you know where this is going. So I thought, I'm going to go plant a church. And then I started investigating, and I think I still have a folder full of notes that I'd taken, plans I'd already started to make to, what would it look like to go plant a church somewhere and do all of that. And I started contacting people and developing a network and kind of figuring out how that all worked. And right in the middle of that, God interrupted again and called us to Mississippi, where I followed a pastor who had been pastoring the same group of people for 40 years. And that was not easy. And I thought, man, I thought I was going to plant a church. And then I came here and followed in my father-in-law's footsteps, who had pastored here 35 years, who's an absolute legend in this church and this community, and had such a fruitful ministry. And I followed him, and he made the transition as easy as possible. But it's still hard. So I had a plan. God had purposes. Look at Luke chapter 1:29. Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered. Isn't that something? And wondered. Do you ever wonder sometimes if God interrupts your life or changes something? Do you ever wonder, what is God trying to do? What is he up to? What is he trying to get to happen? And we always kind of have the same idea. God, if I just had a few more details. Why is this happening? If you can show me what good this will do, man, I'm all in. I'm all on board. I just need to understand a little bit more. All right, here's the third thought. You don't have to know the whole plan to trust that God has a purpose. Can I say that again? You don't have to know the whole plan to trust that God has a purpose. God is way too good to give you all the details. Because there's some things that He will call you to do that you wouldn't do if you knew step 5 when you took step 1. And there's some places that God's going to lead you that you would never choose on your own, but He has to lead you there because He has to do some things in you in order to do some things through you. But you would never follow, and I would never follow. But God's not going to give you all the details on every journey. And I think you and I all have the same thoughts about this. We all just want to understand. For the most mysterious parts of life and the hardest parts of life, most of us are dominated, if not all of us, by one question. Why? God, just tell me why, and I'll do it. Just tell me why, and I'll be okay. But you don't have to know the whole plan to trust that God has a purpose. Do you know what the number one command in the Bible is? You would think it would be to serve or to give or to love or to forgive. Do you know what the number one command in the entire Bible is? Do not be afraid. Over 300 times the Bible tells us, do not be afraid. You know why? Because fear is one of the greatest hindrances to God's presence and His work, and it undermines His purposes in your life and in mine. And so as the angel appears to Mary with this plan that's different than hers, he says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Luke 1:30. But the angel said to her, do not be afraid. You found favor with God. Now let's talk about that for a minute. Isn't favor a strange idea? What does it mean? Does it mean that God has favorites? What does it mean, favor? Here's how I think about favor. It's the undeserved blessings of God. It's the undeserved blessings of God. You can't earn it. You can't deserve it. There's nothing that you did to cause it. It's the undeserved blessings of God. Sometimes God just blesses you. How else do you explain this little teenage girl in this little hillbilly village that God picked to be the mother of Jesus? How else do you explain that? Man, several years ago, one of our missions teams went to Indonesia, which is the largest Muslim nation on earth. And we went to build a church, and we didn't get to build the building physically, but we got to do a lot of ministry. And the team that went had one of the most unusual experiences. As it turns out, in the middle of this, dominant Muslim nation, the mayor of that province that our team was in was Christian. And he invited the whole team to come to whatever the facility was that he had, and he threw out a banquet like for kings. And our whole team was invited into this very spiritual and purposeful divine appointment and ate like kings and were hosted by the mayor of the province. What do you call that? That's favor. That's favor. Now I imagine if Mary was thinking about it this way, she would have interpreted it differently. Sometimes favor's not material. Sometimes favor is that people like you. Sometimes favor is that people bless you, or they say nice things about you, or you have a good relationship, you're a part of a great church, or you have unexplainable good health. But here's the thing with favor. Favor doesn't always feel good at first. I can imagine Mary's interpretation of favor was, great, my wedding's gonna be on a reality TV show and it's all gonna be paid for. Favor, right? Look at verse 31. But here's the favor she got. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. Whoa, time out, God. Favor for me is I'm pregnant? And you name my baby? I don't even get to pick the name of my baby. I'm pregnant and you name my baby. I'm not married and you're already naming my child. I'm giving birth to a child I didn't choose and he's going to be the Messiah. That sounds like a little more responsibility than a teenage girl would have expected to take on at that time of her life. How would you feel about raising God's son? For those of you who don't have children, let me just warn you for a minute. raising baby sinners is hard. Can I just tell you that? And I got a deep, rich theology for you this morning. And they're sinners. That's what they are. Because they will look at you in the face and they will lie. Because you say, did you have poopy in your diaper? No. What is that smell? You got to go to the bathroom? No. They will lie. They learn the word no before they learn anything else, and I don't know why. Put that down, no. They will look you straight in your soul, and they will defy you and say no. Come here, no. Why do they learn no before they learn I love you? Or before they learn I'll do anything that you ask? Why do they learn that? They learn no. And because they're little baby sinners, and they don't go to the bathroom when you want them to go to the bathroom, and they don't go to sleep when you want them to go to sleep, but you love them, right? But let's don't pretend that they're not little baby sinners, because that's what they are. Now, how about raising God's son in your home? That would be a little intimidating. But God's favor to Mary was that she was chosen to raise God's son in her home and be his mother. But favor doesn't always feel good at first. What if favor was not getting a promotion? What if favor was not getting your dream job? What if favor was a relationship that didn't work out? What if that was favor, but that thing that started off not feeling good ended up being the thing when you look back at it that you said, man, I'm so glad. It was the favor of God in my own. How many times have you heard somebody say, in my own naivety, in my own innocence, in my own unawareness, God gifted me with this. Man, it hurt at the time. I didn't like it. I was disappointed. I was frustrated. But when I look back on it, man, you know why? His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. He can see the whole thing. We can only see inside the moment. Last week, I had such an incredible conversation with a young guy in college. He came to me, and I've known him for years, but he's off at school, and he's been working on a part-time job with the college for a while. But he came to me and said, "Hey, I just want to tell you something." And he's just smiling ear to ear, and I'm thinking, like, what happened? And I haven't interacted with him that much through the years, but we know one another. But he said, I had this part-time job, and I'd applied for that part-time role to become full-time, and, I was in line for that, and that should have worked out. He said, but it didn't work out. He said, and then he had a tragedy that happened a few months later in his life that was really terrible. But here's the thing. He said, through those pains and disappointments, God drew me to himself in a way that I've never known him. And it changed my life. And he's in a regular Bible study with a few other guys, and they meet together several days of the week, and they're meeting together and sharing and growing and praying and changing. And I'm telling you, I've never seen a smile on his face that big in all my life. Because what started out not feeling that good ended up being the favor of God that brought him in deep relationship. Favor doesn't always feel good at first. Look at verse 34. How will this be, Mary asked the angel, since I'm a virgin? So the path that God chooses doesn't always make sense, and we're reluctant sometimes because we can't see how it'll happen. And Mary's protest is not just that this is impossible. Her protest is, this is ridiculous. I can't have a baby. Verse 35, and the angel answered her, the Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore, the child to be born will be called Holy, the Son of God, for nothing will be impossible with God. Man, that's a good word. Nothing is impossible with God. Would you say that with me? Nothing is impossible with God. Say it again. Nothing is impossible with God. Come on, say it again. Nothing is impossible with God. One more time. Nothing is impossible with God. Nothing is impossible with God. Nothing. That's a good word, isn't it? Nothing is impossible with God. And so Maybe you're here today and you have some kind of weight weighing on you. You're worried about something. You're afraid of something that might happen or something that might not happen. Here's what I want you to know. God can intervene. He can change circumstances. He can open a door you didn't even know was a door. He can shift things so fast. He can rearrange. He can heal. He can forgive. He can restore. He can reconcile. He can upend things in ways. He can do miracles. The question is, what's God calling you to do? Maybe He's calling you to trust Him in an area that you've been trying to fix it yourself. And you've been working on it yourself. And you've been doing your best. And maybe you've been doing an honest and a good job at trying to work it out. But it's not working out. And maybe what God's asking you to do is to give up some control, to let go and to trust Him. Maybe what God's inviting you to do is to come in and lead a life group or serve on a ministry team. Maybe God's calling you to go back to school or to reach out to someone that's been lingering on your mind for a few days and you don't know why. Maybe He's calling you to mend a broken relationship. Maybe what He's calling you to do is say, you know what, God, I'm going to go ahead and just go all the way over to the crazy side, and I'm just going to give you 10% of everything that I earn, and you know what, I'm just going to see what happens. I'm just going to trust you and see what happens. Maybe He's calling you to end a relationship. Maybe He's calling you into ministry. Maybe you had a plan, but He has a purpose. Maybe you've been going down a certain path. Maybe you're home for the Thanksgiving holiday, and maybe you're already following a path somewhere, but God's saying, that's not the purpose I have for you. Shift this way. Change majors. Change schools. Follow me. Maybe you have a plan, but God has a purpose. So the question is, what's God calling you to do? Is God interrupting your plan? Is God interrupting your plan? See, here's the thing. Mary had a choice, and it's the choice that all of us have when God works in our life. It's to either continue with the plan that we have, or it's to trust God and follow His purpose. That's a crossroads. But here's the last thought. The outcome is God's responsibility. Obedience is our responsibility. So here's the good thing that takes a lot of pressure off a lot of us. We're not trying to control the outcome of life and decide what it should look like or what it should do. We're just trying to say, God, what do you want me to do? And then when you do that, outcome is on Him. What becomes of it is up to Him, but obedience is up to us. God asked Mary to do something that took faith and took trust, and it changed her whole plan. It changed her entire plan. Now, look, I sometimes when you say things like this, teach things like this, people get this idea that I need to go do something risky and daring and impulsive and crazy. And sometimes we make up, like, what's the craziest thing I can do? Okay, that must be what I'm going to trust God for that. You can't trust God for something that's not His will. Like, you actually have to be right about whether it's His purpose or not. You can't just say, well, I'm trusting God for this, I'm trusting God for that, because that'll solve the problem, that'll fix it, that'll cause the outcome. No. What you have to say is, God, have you spoken to me? Have you led me? Are you showing me? Are you shifting in my life? Are you interrupting? Is this a divine interruption that becomes an invitation? And if it is, that's where we follow. Mary had such a beautiful response to the angel's interruption. And I hope and I pray that it'll always be my response, and I hope and I pray that it'll always be yours. Verse 38, she said, I am the Lord's servant. In other words, I had this plan, I had these cute curtains picked out, I had this whole thing that was going to happen. But in the end, Jesus said it like this, not my will be done, but yours. God, I'm the Lord's servant. Wow. Do you know how much freedom there is when you open your hands and you say, okay, God, I'm not going to try to control this. I'm not going to try to manipulate or fix or produce a certain outcome. I'm the Lord's servant. It's, Lord, whatever you want me to do, whatever step you're asking me to take. The question is, do you really want God's will? I really want God's will until it's different than mine. How about you? And then I go, well, a little bit of struggle there. Can I tell you some of the biggest blessings of life are right on the other side of you and I surrendering to God's will? Some of the biggest blessings and the greatest joy. I wish you could have seen the face of this young guy I talked to last week who was just beaming with excitement and peace and joy over this relationship that he's found with God that's shaken up everything. The same God that was with Mary is with you. And whatever's weighing your heart down, I want to bring you back one more time to the verse we started with. God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. So the question today is, what is the Holy Spirit saying to you? Would you stand with me this morning? And if you're online or in the room, would you just close your eyes for a moment? We live in a world of fear. But as the Lord interrupts and He calls and He changes and He invites and He opens doors, He whispers to your heart, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. The same God that was with Mary is with you and with me. So Lord, today we still our hearts. And God, I ask now and we ask together that you speak to us individually, online and in the room. God, that you would speak and clarify and share. Help us to hear what you're saying so that we can respond to you. Lord, we thank you today for your guidance. Lord, I thank you that you're lifting heaviness, and I thank you that you're pushing back fear, and I thank you that you're raising faith, and I thank you that you're releasing peace and love, joy. God, as we open our hands and open our hearts and open our minds and surrender to you, Lord, you're flowing in this moment. Lord, we thank you for the joy that your presence brings. As our worship team begins to lead us, just lift your heart and mind up. Let the Holy Spirit speak to you as we worship.